Hi, all of you. My name is Even Bolstad. I'm the president of the European Association of People Management, and it's my great privilege to introduce you to this webinar today on HR Competency Study. The EAPM, they are doing this survey together with as partners to the RBL Group and University of Michigan for the second time. And the EAPM is an umbrella association of 35 national associations. So this has a really great spread within Europe. I'm also managing director of a Norwegian HR association, and we have been working together with RBL Group for many years. And it's so fun to be a part of this because the competencies within the team which provides this study are really great. It's very often referred to as the Dave Ulrich study, but the official name is HR Competency Study. One of the things I have learned to appreciate is, well, it's the world's leading competency study as a start, and that's a good start, but it focuses on effects. It does not say that you have this and that competency. It doesn't count, but it instead links the competencies to the effect on different stakeholders. It also, in a great way, I think, separates which competencies are driving effect on an individual and on a department level. So we, as a team, are bringing this to you. I sit here in Oslo, Norway. In London, Rebecca Norman, she will come in and do the Q&A afterwards, together with Natalia, and that is the EAPM team at the CIPD Secretariat. We have technical production in Oslo and in Tønsberg, Norway. And this video is made available for 35 national associations. I also think that we have viewers from Americas, Asia, and Africa. But we also, in Leeds, we have Alan Freed. And it's a huge privilege to introduce you, Alan. You're a Scotsman living in Leeds. You're managing director for RBL Europe. Working with a lot of renowned clients all over the world. You are a trusted advisor, principal consultant, and you are a great guy and a gifted speaker. So I'm really looking forward to this. So just to do this in the Eurovision spirit, take it away, Al.
Evan, thank you. It's so nice to be connected and to reconnect with you. Of course, this is probably the, I don't know, 10th or 11th time that we've had the opportunity to work together. And it's always a huge pleasure and great to be working with you and your EAPM colleagues. Let's make this interactive and enjoyable. We've got an hour to spend together. We've got lots to fit into the hour. I'm going to just share my slides here. Rebecca, thank you so much for managing the chat function. I really appreciate that. All right. Evan, can you confirm that you can see the right screen?
Alan, we can see you. All is well.
Fantastic.
Just want to say, if anyone's got any questions, post them in the chat and I'll happily pick them up. Or if you want to raise your hand, we will be doing Q&As after all of the different sections of Alan's presentation today. And if you accidentally put it in the questions, that's fine too. I'm watching that, so no worries at all. Back over to you, Alan.
Brilliant. Rebecca, big thanks. Thanks for doing that. And Rebecca, Evan, at any point in time, if there's anything you want me to pause on or clarify or re-clarify, don't hesitate. Just jump on in here and let me know. I'm really happy to do that. All right, so let's get started. Evan mentioned RBL, founded by Dave Ulrich and Norm Smallwood. And this study, the Human Resource Competency Study, has now been active for 35 years. It's a study that's done in partnership between the RBL Group and the Ross School of Executive Education at the University of Michigan. Over the course of the 35 years, over 120,000 respondents to the 360 question set that we send out approximately once every 5 years. So it's a gigantic data set that's always growing, and we're here to discuss the latest research. But before we get into the insights, there are kind of 4 critical points that I just want to reinforce and reference. Here's what we learned from the latest research, 4 critical things. Number 1, HR can't just focus on individuals. It's not a people or a human capital or a talent or a competency or an employee-focused function. HR's job from this latest round and previous rounds actually is that we've got to figure out how the collection of individual people joins together into organization. And again, the latest research is really, really key, right? Organization outperforms individual by up to 8 times. So our job is to focus on how we make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So point number 1, we don't just focus on individuals, we focus on how we group individuals together to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. Point number 2, before we jump in, isolating and improving one single HR practice area has very, very low impact. So trying to identify how do we become the best recruitment organization in the world, or how do we become the best onboarding system, how do we develop the best training programs. When those activities are thought of as isolated activities, they have very, very low impact. Again, this whole message from the research, the latest research round, is all about power and strength through integration. So how do we integrate those processes so that they work together in ways that produce an outcome that's very, very hard to replicate? That's point number 2. So number 1, it's not about individuals, it's about how we bring individuals together to make them more than the sum of their parts. Number 2, it's not about individual practices either. It's about integrating practices to really drive impact. Number 3, third key message before we jump in, it's not about annual calendared events in the diary. Our function has got to be more than that. It's not about doing annual succession in the month when annual succession is due to be done and completed. We've got to work on how those events that appear in the HR calendar come together in ways that create patterns and influence culture over time. So we've got to stop thinking about events on the HR diary and start to think about what are the patterns that we're putting into the culture of our organization that really impacts performance. And then finally, it's not just about a single stakeholder. HR, from the latest research round and previous, by the way, this isn't new, but we're not there to serve the employee. We're not there to serve the line manager. We've got to keep in mind a much broader set of stakeholders in the way that we approach our work. We can influence, because of the impact that we have on organization, external stakeholders, investors, customers. And so we've got to bear in mind that we're not there to serve one single set of stakeholders, we're there to serve a broad set. So those are the 4 kind of critical elements that I just review before we jump into some of the findings of the research study and before we get jumped in. Rebecca, Evan, anything that you would add in there? Do those insights make sense before we get started? Those are our kind of table stakes before we jump into the conversation.
I think that was a great start. And as you said, the complexity will increase. So just lean back and focus.
Yes, I'll try to exemplify one of our competencies here in just a few moments. You'll see which one. Okay, so we said 35 years old. When we first got started back in 1987, this was the very first model. Referenced this message of HR becoming much more knowledgeable around the business. That was kind of one of our early messages. 1992 introduced this idea of personal credibility. Some of you may remember from previous research rounds, this whole idea of the credible activist, which was incredibly popular in HR circles, really the predecessor of credible activism. Came from our 1992 research round and introduced this idea of the importance of personal credibility and trust in HR. 97, end of the century, lots of tech firms getting started and lots of mergers, acquisitions, much faster paced environment in business. We start to see the emergence of culture as one of the critical skill sets required by HR professionals. Now, 2002, we see the emergence of strategic contribution, so an HR technology. This idea that, man, we've got to start to think much more broadly about the impact that we can have as an organization. Culture starts to merge into this idea of strategic contribution. We employed a new graphic designer in 2007, and you can see here that we started to think about 6 different competencies. On the right-hand side, we see competencies that really help the HR function connect to the business. And on the left-hand side, we see these competencies that relate to our people orientation. And in the middle, we've got this culture and change steward piece on the very, very top. That was the 2007 model. Focus on execution, kind of getting the people side right and getting the focus on the business right. In 2012, we had the hockey puck. Again, this was about having impact on 3 different levels. We have impact as individuals. Once we're able to have individual impact, the red circle in the middle, we can then start to think about how we have organizational impact as a HR professional. They're the 4 green competency domains. And then we also learned that the best way for us to have organizational impact is to really understand the context and what's going on in the external environment. So that was the blue. 2016, we had this introduction of the Paradox Navigator. And we really organized the model based on 3 different areas of focus for HR. So at the bottom, we've got our core drivers, we have our foundation, technical foundation. Across the middle, we've got our 3 core drivers of activity where we get the majority of our impact, and then some strategic enablers across the top of the model. And that was the way that we organized the data in 2016. Here's the 2021 model, the latest model, 5 competency areas. You'll see that we've transitioned to the use of verbs rather than adjectives. This is about what we do. It's not about where we sit. It's not about the role that we have. It's not about the title in our job description. It's about what do we do every day to really push that HR agenda and to drive the creation of value in our organizations. 5 critical areas that we're going to work through during the session and during the time that we've got together. Now, we're going to organize the review of these competencies in 3 ways. Number 1, what competencies do HR professionals need in order to deliver results? That's the first kind of focus. We're going to spend 5 or 6 minutes thinking about that question. Number 2, what should be the characteristics of an effective HR department? So we'll look at the answer to that question as our kind of second chapter. And then 3rd and finally, what capabilities should HR help create to deliver business results? So what are the kind of core outcomes of our work that really drive value? So number 1, what are the competencies that an individual HR professional needs in order to deliver results? Number 2, what are the characteristics of a great HR function? And remember, functions outperform individuals. And number 3, excuse me, what are the organizational capabilities that HR should really be trying to create in order to deliver business results? That's how we're going to focus our time and our energy. All right, so the research has got a lot of attention over the 35 years. 5 PhD dissertations now have been written using the data set, 7 books published, hundreds of articles, lots of different clients that have applied this type of work. So we're delighted to be able to present this to you. Critical message. We sometimes say content is king, don't we? It's a very popular statement. If content is king, then context is the kingdom in which the king rules or reigns. So in order to make sure that we've got the right content in our study, we've got to really have a great understanding of the context. Now let's go back. Medieval history, what strategy 101, right? It proves this point. Let's go back to European medieval history. Content was really important. If you were a military leader or a king or a queen, you wanted to have a great army. And so you would invest in ensuring that that army had the right weaponry, the right protection, whatever it might be. Context was also critical. Let's imagine that there are two comparable armies about to come together in a battle, and one is at the top of the hill and one is at the bottom of the hill. Historically, we know that there is a significant advantage given if you are running downhill than if you are running uphill and you are at war. So we'd put our money on the team at the top of the hill. That's the message of context. In HR, we've got to understand the landscape in which our organizations are operating well. And when we really understand that landscape, where the hills are, how to get to the top of those hills, how to know if we're at the bottom of a hill, how to avoid the craters, and how to avoid some of the obstacles that the landscape provides, we can then start to focus on the content. What type of weapons are going to be most effective, etc., etc. So, critical message. Content is critical. We focus on that a lot in HR. Context is absolutely vitally important, though. If we focus on content and we miss context, we can end up in a real mess. It's very, very rare to get that the other way around. If we focus on context, really helps to shape what it is that we choose to work on from a content perspective in HR. Again, I'm just going to pause. Beck, Rebecca, Evan, does that make sense? And would you have any questions or any further insights that you would share with the participants on the webinar today?
I think you're doing great, Alan. You are really good on describing rather complex things in a way that even I can understand. That is the acid test, I have been told. So keep up the good work.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. Rebecca, any messages, any questions so far?
No questions have come up so far. I'm really interested in the individual competencies bit. I'm interested to see how the HR people that I've worked with that I really rate measure up to what you think of as being someone who can deliver great HR.
All
so
right.
That's going to be the exciting bit for me.
Well, let's get there, Rebecca. Let's get there. I'm really glad. Thank you. If we look over the last 50 years or so, we see kind of three clear periods of evolution in the function and one that is starting to emerge right now. Again, this is context, right? So this is the HR context. So I guess that early stage of HR administration was really critical. That was the foundation of our function, the old days of personnel. We were there to lighten a burden. We were there to conduct administrative work that removed a burden from other people. 70s, maybe even before that in some places, but certainly in the 70s and 80s, this kind of idea of focusing on HR areas of speciality took off. So we had the birth of learning and development and the birth of compensation and benefits and the birth of organization design. It's kind of an area of speciality built on top of the administration. And that continues even today at pace, right? So we've got now much more focus on talent acquisition, perhaps, and continuing to build that area of specialization on the back of HR administration. That was the second wave here, the wave of the HR practice. Dave Ulrich, the founder at RBL and one of my very best friends and close colleagues, Dave became very, very popular when he realized that there was this transition in HR from focusing on administration to focusing on expertise. And Dave was the first to design and think about the HR business partner way of organizing the function, when he realized that this transition was taking place. And essentially, Dave said, how do you ensure that expertise can be put to use in an organization at a time when it's most needed? And he built the business partner model essentially off the back of a professional services organization or a consulting firm. If you were to call up a consulting firm, normally they would send somebody out to visit with you, and that person would ask lots of questions and try to understand the organization and the challenges that you are facing. They would then return in-house, speak to their specialists about some of the challenges that they had observed and that you had spoken of, prepare some way of helping you to address those challenges, and then return and present to you their findings and a pitch, right, about what they could do. The business partner model is based off exactly the same type of thinking. The business partner understands the organization well, understands some of the challenges, and interacts with centers of experts in ways that solutions to some of those challenges can be created and activated into the business units. That was this kind of HR strategy wave, right? This third wave. What we're seeing now emerge is this outside-in approach. And here's the message. I think it's so relevant in our own lives, right? The message is the talent and the culture and the type of leadership in an organization has a huge impact on internal stakeholders, but increasingly it has a huge impact on external stakeholders too. It drives customer loyalty if we get it right. It has a huge impact on net promoter scoring if we get it right, if we've got the right people with the right skill set answering questions in the right way. And so more and more focus and energy since Peter Drucker began talking about this kind of people side of leadership and management in the 90s, more and more focus has been put on HR has the big impact on external stakeholders too. And finally, we start to see in the last few years, much more attention and focus been placed on how we maximize, that opportunity, how we have big impact on external as well as internal stakeholders. All right, so Beck, have you got a question?
Yeah, so we've had a comment here. Could the fifth phase be inside out?
Oh, I like it. I'd love to know the thinking why. Yes, here's why I like outside in. I like outside in because I think that we have probably been inside out for a very, very long time. Like we're focused on internal issues, right, Beck? We focus on, I guarantee if we did a calendar review of the participants on this webinar, and we said, how much of your time and energy, when you look back at your calendar over the last 6 months, has been invested in internal stakeholders, and how much of your time and energy have you spent working on influencing and affecting external stakeholders? I would bet, of course I don't know because I don't have the data, Beck, but I would bet 95% plus of our time and energy is spent servicing internal demand rather than affecting external behavior. That's just my gut feel. Beck, would you agree, or do you have a different perspective?
I think that's probably about right, but there's definitely a switch happening.
There's a switch happening for sure, for sure. I think we live in a world now where consumer trends change very, very quickly. What consumers want and need from an organization changes very, very quickly. And so for me, the name of the game is staying relevant. Relevance in 2021 is value. You think about TikTok or various other apps, right? They haven't made a significant amount of money. They've started to now monetize their product, but they weren't largely profitable until 18 months ago. And yet they had massive valuations because they were incredibly relevant amongst a key population of users. HR's job is to make sure ultimately, right, that our organizations stay relevant amongst their targeted stakeholders, because relevance is connected to value in the age that we live in. If we become less relevant, Beck, we lose a lot of money, we lose value. And so how do we become more relevant with an inside out focus versus an outside in focus? My gut sense is we've got to get the balance right. And by the way, Beck, it's a great question, because I just want to emphasize one thing. What I'm not saying is that we suddenly need to reverse those numbers and start to plow all of our energy into external. That would also be a disaster, I think. We've got to get the balance right between those two things.
For me, there's something in the middle around influencing our people internally to support more external focus. So it could be CSR, volunteering, it could be the environment, the latest COP26. I think there's something where we can really support our people on those wider global issues. So for me, that's why I like the inside out version.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you entirely. We've got to find ways to help our organization connect and stay relevant. That's the dreamland, right, for us in HR, for sure.
That's the sweet spot that we're all going for.
That's it, the sweet spot right there.
Alan, may I ask you, I mean, outside in, it's very easy to interpret that as customer-centric only. And people might say, oh, but we are talking about people-centric practices these days. Isn't there a conflict, people would say, between being outside in and being people-centric? How does that resonate with your findings and your perspectives?
Oh, brilliant. We sometimes ask, Evan, at the start of our sessions when we're live or now online, what's the most valuable thing that a HR function can do for employees? And we got a kind of checklist, you know, A, we can become a great place to work award winner. B, we can ensure that we've got the best talent development programs in the world. C, we can really focus on retaining great talent. We have this checklist of things and we ask people their response. The answer is that we can ensure that our organizations win in the marketplace. If our organization is winning in the marketplace, then suddenly the opportunity to serve our employees well becomes magnified. If our organization is losing in the marketplace and becoming less relevant, then our ability to invest in our workforce becomes hamstrung. And so I think this kind of first message is, we're jumping ahead here to kind of the HR department, but the priorities of the HR department are nothing to do with HR. The priorities of the HR department are the priorities of the business, and ensuring that the priorities of the business can be executed well using all of the levers that HR has at its disposal. So I would say, Evan, that the very best way to take great care of our employees and to ensure that we can invest in their well-being, that we can invest in their skill set, is to ensure first and foremost that our business is in a great position in its market space, that it's creating value, because that helps us to generate the revenue and to generate the reputation that will ensure we can do more for our employees than an organization that is not winning in the marketplace.
And isn't it also so that the most successful companies tend to be the most attractive workplaces? Well,
when you look at the best places to work, right, there seems to be some type of correlation there, Evan, that's for sure. Yeah, it's a great question.
And Alan, that leads nicely on to another question talking about attracting and growing talent. Got a lovely comment here. It's like HR supports the intersectionality of business. Would that mean we should place greater value on breadth beyond HR when we're attracting and growing talent? And then a separate question, take the huge changes in the car industry. What should HR do or change? What should be focused on? Ooh. Over to you.
So 2 great questions. Let me think more about the car industry. Just Beck, remind me about the first one again, because it was also very good.
So the first question was,
breadth in the function, right?
indeed. Should we be looking at breadth when we're attracting and growing talent?
100%. Yes, please. Yes. We tend to, by the way, I don't want my, I don't want anything that I say in the next 5 minutes to reflect anything other than fantastic support for HR certification. Right, upskilling in the function and ensuring that we are, bringing our A game and technically, legally compliant is essential. Number one, I just want to make sure that that's clear. And in addition to that, breadth is so critical, right? We work with a CHRO from a large global tech organization who tries to fill their HR function with 3 different groups of people. They say they want 1/3 of their people to have kind of that HR technical background, solid HR history. They call 1/3 of their people weird and wonderfuls. I don't think they use that title internally, Beck, to be honest, but that's how it's described to us.
I don't know. I think I'd fit in quite well to that category.
Yeah, you might, right? But this is kind of a teacher deciding to take a career break, people returning to the workforce, maybe after, spending some time raising children or raising a family, people just switching around, a psychologist from university who decides that they want to jump into corporate life for a period of time. And they just bring a very, very different set of perspectives and skills. And then 1/3 of their people, they try to fill with talent from other functions within the business. Can we bring in some people from finance for a 2-year stint in HR or marketing or wherever it might be? And I think that more breadth of thinking about connecting to the business and to external stakeholders in the function would be of real significant benefit in a lot of places, no doubts from what I've seen. The car question, you had a great car question too. What was the car question, Beck?
It did. It said, take the huge changes in the car industry. What should HR do or change? Or what should be focused on? And I guess that could apply to any sector that's gone under a massive change in the recent years. Yeah,
well, we're going to answer that in section 3 here when we talk about capability. What are the 3 capabilities that we need? But what do we see organizations focusing on? Let me give you a kind of a bit of a warm-up before we get to section 3. Number 1, customer connectivity or customer centricity or whatever the language that you use in your organization. We see organizations that are creating more value than their peers, really over-indexing and turning up the volume on customer centricity. So that would be a critical value-creating capability. Are we genuinely connected to customers to the point where we know what they want and can anticipate their needs before they can express them? Number 2.
Sorry, Alan, just on that. So how does that differ from a business development department or a marketing department whose ethos is probably all around customer centricity as well?
Well, I think that we've got 3 levers that we pull, right, that are very unique to our function when we consider kind of, let's just take the 2 examples, BD or marketing. We have 3 unique levers that we pull that can really enact change and have cultural impact. Number 1, this area of talent. Number 2, area of leadership. And then number 3, our ability to shape organization. Unique. Business development can't pull those 3 levers. Marketing don't pull those 3 levers. So when HR is focused on that customer-centric approach, then suddenly the way we start to think about the type of talent that we need to deliver anticipated customer needs can be really impactful, more impactful than if that's an insight owned by BD. Suddenly we can start to think about the type of leadership that's required in the age that we're working in, and whether our current leadership group and skill set is fit for purpose or not. And then 3rd and finally, we can start to think about the design and way that we work in ways to deliver products that customers love. And again, BD and marketing, they're terrific functions, but they don't have that type of an impact. So I think when the HR function gets focused on that capability, we start to see much more cultural impact than whether it's owned by a BD function or a marketing function. Which, by the way, is why it is a brilliant time to be in HR, right? I mean, the best of times to be in HR right now. Yeah. So I would focus on customer connection. Agility seems to be the big one that people are really trying to turn the dial up. Can we respond very, very quickly to changing needs externally? What does it look like? Or do we have a hierarchy and a bureaucracy that seems to really slow us down and impede our ability to make changes very, very quickly? Again, when HR owns that agenda, much more powerful than if anybody else in the business owns that agenda, any other function. And then finally, Beck, we see this kind of continued focus on innovation. How do we really drive innovation? We have a lot of HR functions that have developed processes and skill sets that support business execution. Let's get things done. Let's be as efficient as we can. Let's drive the business that we've built. In my experience and in our experience at RBL, Beck, those processes that we've spent a lot of time building aren't always effective at driving exploration, new ideas. Where do we go next? How do we continue to create more value? So we tend to over-index our functional focus on executing our existing business. And we don't always look at our HR processes through the lens of, are they also allowing us to explore what we need to do differently tomorrow so that we can continue to create great value for our shareholders and for our stakeholders? So don't get super sidetracked by execution. Make sure we've got that healthy balance between execution and exploration in our function.
When you were just talking about the 3 unique levers that HR has available to them, a sort of effectively talent, leadership and OD, they're internal looking functions. So can you just put a little bit more explanation around how they kind of impact externally as well?
Yeah, this is actually great. This is so much better than going through slides, Beck. I mean, I love this. Thank you very, very much.
And just to say, these questions are not my questions. They are coming in from our wonderful audience. So please, please do keep them coming. Hats
off, audience. Thank you, because you're helping to shape this session in a way which is so much more interesting. Yes, talent can be, I'm getting my jacket off. It's getting like, this questions are warming me up, Beck. It's great. Talent can be internally focused and inside out. There's no doubts about it. It can be. If you want to make it impactful, though, it can also be incredibly externally focused. So in the next 5 years, how will our business continue to grow? What are some of the areas that we'll be exploring? What are the capabilities that we're going to need to delight our customers? And now, what are the critical roles and talent that will be required during that process? And how is it different from today? That would be a perfect kind of way of making your talent focus external, outside in, rather than inside out. And then we can do the same with leadership, right? And we can do the same with org design. So I guess the starting point is everything, the mindset. You can have a mindset of creating value. If that's the case, you'll always start outside, because value is defined by the receiver of what an organization does and not by the giver. Right, Beck? I'm going to buy, your best friend, Beck, is going to buy you a Christmas gift.
Okay.
And she knows you really well. She searches for hours and she buys a beautiful gift. And it's an item of clothing. Okay. She buys you the gift, and the gift is 2 sizes too big. Right?
Brilliant.
Ouch, 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 ouch. You get to decide the value of that gift. And you might say, thank you. It was such a nice thought. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure, Beck, that you would say all the right things. And it still
don't
hurts
know me
a little
very
bit.
well, Alan.
Right? Oh, yeah, that's right. You might not actually. Yeah, Evan has told me. You're still going to feel a little bit of an ouch. There's a bit of a sting there. By the way, this is a principle, a general principle that can be applied everywhere, and in business particularly, and in HR. The value of what we do in HR is not defined by us or by business leaders. It's defined by our customers. And if customers love it and we get it right, by the way, they become more loyal, our NPS scores grow, our market share grows, and the financial results are impacted positively. If customers don't like it, then they leave, right? And we become less relevant in the marketplace and less valuable, and our ability to have impact with employees is negatively impacted. So we've got to bear in mind that the value of what we do starts outside. If we want to create value, therefore, as a HR leader, as a HR professional, then we've got to start with where value is defined. It's defined by people outside the firm, not people inside the firm. And so if we've got that outside in value creation mindset, then it will naturally take us to an outside in view of talent, leadership, and organization. If we've got, let me be provocative a little bit, Beck. If we've got a gratitude collection mindset, then we'll start inside out, right?
And what does that mean for you?
That means my job in HR is to collect thank yous. Thank you for getting that done on time. Thank you for building fulfilling the role. Thank you for ensuring that the process was completed efficiently. Thank you for your contribution to that project. Thank you for having that difficult conversation with the employee that I should have had myself but didn't want to, so delegated back to you. Thank you for sending that email that I should have written as the manager. Thank you for creating the performance feedback process that minimizes my exposure to having to give bad news to my employees. I'm being provocative, right? But so often, but we do come across HR professionals that have in their mind the collection of thank yous more so than the creation of value. And that mindset will have a really big impact on how we approach those levers that we pull. You think about it, Beck, if I'm collecting thank yous and you're creating value, then the talent processes that I create are going to look very different to the ones that you create. And the provocation to business leaders about what we need to do next will be entirely different. Same with leadership, same with org design. So, I mean, it leads to this great conclusion, right? Mindset first, skill set second. These skills that I'm showing on this page here, these competency skills, these verbs, these actions, if you've got the wrong mindset, they're sub-optimized. With the right mindset, they take you in a really, really interesting new space.
That's really interesting, because I was having a conversation recently with someone about recruiting and not recruiting for skill set, because actually the skill set I can teach, but the mindset I can't. And it was way more important to look for the right mindset for the role rather than the skill set that I was personally recruiting for just recently.
We see that, don't we, again and again, Beck, too, right? Hire for attitude, train for skills. I mean, I mean, it's become very, very common, and absolutely. Our attitude in HR has got to be one of, I'm here to create value from the perspective of external customers, and that's going to shape the way that I treat my internal stakeholders.
And you mentioned internal stakeholders just as a question comes in about that.
Yes,
it's almost as if you read my mind. So how do we find out what our internal customers want, what they value? And other than pay and benefits, you know, what is there? How can you find out what is really important to them?
Oh, good. That's a good question. And by the way, let me just offer one other kind of message. When we talk about internal stakeholders, eliminate the language of customer. The customer is always, normally, if you're going to kind of finish that statement, right. The customer is always right. The customer is king. All right. Think as a HR professional about your last 10 interactions with people in your business. Have they always been right? I guarantee probably not, right? They come to you because they're not right and they need a little bit of advice. I think that the language of internal customer creates an unequal relationship between HR and the people that we support. So your business partners, I would much prefer for us to be using that type of internal language than the language of customer. We're not here to serve our internal customer. We're here to create value for our external stakeholder. And that's going to have an impact on the way that we interact with our internal colleagues. So that would be my first. Again, I'm going to be provocative a little bit here, Beck, and push and say, gee, abolish the language of customer when you're talking about people that you work with internally. How do we get their insights then about our colleagues? It's dialogue, isn't it? It's conversation, it's pulse studies. There are so many new HR tech firms now that are able to kind of create that insight from data that gives you some type of indicator about what you should be focusing on next and on what your employees value. Good organizations that are in the engagement space would also have a whole series of evidences, right, about what's more important. So now post-pandemic, what do we see? We see this huge emphasis on values, and if the data that we have been exposed to is accurate, it's telling us that more than ever now, employees are searching for meaning and purpose in their workplace. They want to be connected to impact. They want to be connected to, to those elements. So there's lots of data from great firms, I think, that we're surrounded by.
For me personally, it's flexibility. That is the thing I value above and beyond everything else, and the ability to kind of rule my own destiny. Yeah,
it's a great insight. A great insight. How would your company learn that for you, Beck? You're clearly somebody that they would, I'm going to assume that they want to retain, that they want to build around in the future. Your perspective and your opinion is going to be valuable to them. Like, what is your organization doing, Beck, to make sure that it is aware of what its talents demand and require and want from an employer? What are they doing?
Yeah, so you mentioned pulse surveys. There is a survey every couple of weeks to see what's important, what's going on in our world. Regular one-to-ones with my manager, very open, flexible forums. Anonymous abilities to post back what's important to you as well. So lots and lots of opportunity to feedback, both actively and in a more passive manner, so that they don't know who I am necessarily, although in fairness, usually people do want to know who I am. So it tends to be me saying quite loudly what's working for me and what isn't. And I have a great organization that allows me that voice.
Yeah, I like it. Some really good ideas there. Right. And Beck, your comment reminds me of one thing, right? Performance evaluation, performance feedback. Here's what we're learning. If you've got 100 points to determine whether your performance evaluation processes are effective or not, the maximum points you can have from the process is 20. 80 points are assigned to the dialogue between the manager and the employee. Right, so you could have a brilliant process that you've spent hours designing in HR and it's fantastic and it ticks 100 boxes and it's got bells and whistles. If the manager doesn't execute that in a way that creates this idea of an ongoing dialogue between manager and employee, then, I mean, it's going to be really, really hard for you to pass the exam. Right, so how do we enable our managers to engage in an ongoing dialogue with employees, talking about exactly these issues, Beck, that you're discussing? That would be the question that I would ask if I was working in HR.
And we've had some comments when you talked about dialogue being the most important thing, you know, here, absolutely, couldn't agree more. So clearly there are lots of bits of the audience that are agreeing with you, Alan.
Yeah, good. 80 points out of 100 in the dialogue, 20 points for process. If you've got a cracking...
Can I ask another question, please? Now, this is going off at a slightly different angle, but I'm keen to get it in. How could the HR and IT industry deal with a lack of experienced IT professionals? there are so few experienced IT professionals, and whilst we can go about reskilling and upskilling current people, the need is now in lots of significant IT projects being undertaken to get those really skilled workers.
Brilliant question.
I wish I had
Beck, I wish I had a prescriptive answer that would be, if you take this action, then this happens. I really don't, but here's what I do know that might be somewhat helpful. Years ago, McKinsey wrote a very, very influential article that turned into a book called The War for Talent. And it introduced this idea of scarcity and really started to weaponize this industry around talent acquisition and ensuring that you've got the right talent, right? Because there's not enough of it. Brilliant research, incredibly well written and marketed, and had a huge impact on the way that organizations have kind of shaped their response. Here's what we've learned. Again, we spoke about this right at the start of the session. Organization outperforms individual talent by 8 to 10 times. I don't know if anybody is a football fan. Sorry for those of you who aren't. You may have watched last night Paris Saint-Germain play Manchester City. PSG are stacked full. By the way, Man City are stacked full of talent too. Let's be really clear about that. PSG are stacked full of individual talents that are world class. Neymar, Mbappe, Messi, leading the line, right? Who wants to face 3 geniuses with a football at their feet like that, right? Nobody wants to do that. But they were played off the park last night by a team that were gelled, cohesive, a unit. They worked incredibly well together. They pressured the ball well together. I mean, it was only 2-1. It should have been 8-0, right? Manchester City, and I'm not a Manchester City fan, they were awesome last night. They outperformed brilliant individuals using incredible teamwork. A couple of weeks ago, I took a group of executive leaders to watch a match, West Ham versus Manchester City. West Ham beat Manchester City on penalties in a cup. They performed incredibly well as a team. Their salaries are 30% of the salaries of the Manchester City. If you kind of check out the total salary expenditure, well, they played incredibly well as a team. So I would be saying, if I were in that type of a situation, if there really is a war for talent, the way that we win the war is through organization. And we wrote a book, Dave wrote a book called Victory Through Organization, which was our kind of tongue-in-cheek response to McKinsey's war for talent. If there is really a war for talent, then you win it by ensuring you've got a brilliant team. And so I would encourage that questioner to go out immediately and order Victory Through Organization and study its content very studiously, Beck, and then reach out to me by email and let me know if we can be more helpful.
Alan, that was great. I'm very aware of time, and it's been fantastic having all of these questions. We have got a couple more questions, but I think we would also like to hear the remainder of your presentation, so some of the highlights of the study. So perhaps we could do a little of that.
Yeah, let me just pull together some key points. And again, I've really enjoyed the question too. So question number 1, right? What are the competencies that a HR professional needs? Well, I mean, this is the output of the research. Accelerating business is the individual competency that is going to have significant impact on your work as a HR professional. That's all about starting from the outside in, recognizing market conditions, and ensuring that the HR agenda is following the market conditions and not kind of independent from the context. That would be this critical message. Business literacy is included there in accelerating the business. I'm not going to bang that drum anymore because I think it's been banged many, many times. It's still not where it needs to be for us as a function as a whole. And it's not just about knowing the language of the business anymore. It's about knowing the language of the markets, knowing the language of financial markets, the way that we're valued, the way that people think about us from an investment perspective. Do we know the language of the strategy and strategic ideas that are shaping our future? So you see that that's the skill set that really is impactful. Advances human capability has the highest kind of impact on business results from an individual perspective. And again, there's our three levers, right? Talent, leadership, and organization right there. Are we advancing those three agendas in ways that allow us to respond to market conditions really well? So they would be the kind of two big ticket items that we would pull out, Beck, when it comes to, okay, if I'm going to focus in on an area that has highest impact from this new competency model, what are the two that really will help me to stand out as a professional? Then it's going to be accelerating the business and advancing human capability. That would be the kind of message here. Again, Beck, here we can see we've just kind of put those 5 competencies on a 2x2. The horizontal is about how effective are we at doing these 5 things generally as a function. Sorry, got it the wrong way around. The vertical is about how effective do we do these 5 things, and the horizontal is what impact do they have on the business. Advances human capability. We don't do it particularly well and it has high impact. Accelerating the business, exactly the same. So that they would be the 2 areas that I'd really pull out there, Beck.
Okay.
When it comes to effective departments, again, like the department has 8 times the impact of the individuals, right? This is about making the whole greater than the sum of the parts. We've got to work well together as a function, right? We've got to make sure that business partners aren't competing with COE specialists, and that the people in shared services don't feel like the stepchildren interrupting the family Christmas party, right? We've got to make sure that 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. Great opportunity to connect. I sometimes talk about this, Beck, as the bricks, right? If you're building a wall, you can invest in the best quality bricks on the planet, but if there's no mortar between them, when the wind blows, the wall is going to topple. The connection between the elements of the function is the mortar. It's what makes it strong. So we've got to always be investing in that mortar between the bricks, right? The business partners, do we have really good connectivity with the specialists and with the centers of experts, with the shared services, and does information really flow between in a way that makes us work well together? You can see here the 3 functional or HR departmental areas of focus that have most impact on results. So employee practices, right? That would be this first critical message. People, performance, information, and work, all of those things that impact kind of the way that our employees come, the way we bring people in and train them, the way that we develop them, the way that we manage and measure performance and hold them accountable, the way that we communicate clear messages to them that are strategic and impactful. They would be those kind of critical first piece. Capability support is second. What are the 2 or 3 capabilities that we're building to outperform our competitors, to stand out in the marketplace? If we don't know what those 2 or 3 things are that make us distinctive, then HR departmental effectiveness is going to be suboptimal. And Beck, we know that, right, from our own kind of, from our own work, right? We wander around Aldi or Lidl, brilliant success stories over the last 12 years, massive expansion in Europe. We know what their capabilities are, right? They keep prices cheap. That's why they're able to attract in so many people. And they try to maintain a level of quality without using brand names. Are the 2 things. HR, when you start to think about everything that you're doing with people, performance, with buy, build, borrow, with retention, with all of our stuff, can you please make sure that you are always enhancing those 2 capabilities and not chipping away at them? Why do you buy an Audi car, right? What are the 2 or 3 things that Audi is doing differently to everybody else? I mean, clear focus on premium performance and quality. Okay, HR, you make sure that everything that you do enhances those 2 capabilities that our customers love. That would be the kind of clear message here. And then stakeholder value. Again, outside in, right? Say no more. That would be the clear message there. Beck, we didn't talk about the capability. We kind of did in an earlier answer to a question, but those capabilities, customer connectivity, innovation, agility, those are the three things where we're really seeing HR functions turn up the volume and say, how do we make those three things happen in our business? Man, what a delight. Thank you, Beck.
Thank you, Alan. We've still had more questions coming in, but we are at the end of the session now. So I'm just going to hand over briefly to Evan to wrap up the session today.
Thank you very much, Beck. Thank you very much, Alan. It has been a great session, and I really appreciated the dialogue way of doing such a seminar. Alan, Beck, you have been fabulous. Natalia, Sven, Kirsten behind the scenes, and all those who have joined us for this seminar, and all those who have participated in doing the study. It's about contributing to build knowledge, and thank you very much for that. And there were some questions about, will this be made available to us? And yes, it will. When this webinar is finished, we will send it out to all national association, and it's up to them if they want to put it on their web pages. It will also be made available at eapm.org. And there you will also find a white paper where all of these illustrations are available. And watch the video again. It's really great stuff. So, and I would very much like to also say that doing such a webinar is one of the positive outcomes of COVID. We didn't do this before, and this is a very easy way of delivering value to national associations from the EAPM side, and by that also directly and indirectly to the benefit of our with an outside in perspective to those end users we have. It's about delivering value to HR, it's about delivering value to companies, and it's about delivering values to society. And COVID is still there. It's striking back. So a wise guy said, take care of yourself. If you do not do that, you will not be able to take care of others. And I think that's a really good message. So be proud of what we have done through COVID, but stay hungry. And as you said, Alan, it's a wonderful time to be within HR. We are doing a difference, and the window of opportunity is huge. So thank you for spending your time with us today, and dig into this. It will be made available within some hours, I guess. And if you are asked by someone, what do you have to read for before you fall asleep? This is obviously the content you should dig into late at night. Have a nice day. Take care of others, but first of all, take care of yourself.